Silverstone delivered once again. Let's talk everything that happened in the British Grand Prix. What a wonderful weekend of Grand Prix action we had at Silverstone. Like I said in the intro, Silverstone delivered once again. I truly think Silverstone is the best circuit because the racing action that we had was just fantastic. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Aaron and I'm going to be taking you through my thoughts on the British Grand Prix. An interesting British Grand Prix because it wasn't fully action-packed, but there was still lots of intrigue, and then there was lots of action towards the end, wasn't there? But where else to start than McLaren? And their performance in Austria was just sort of a warm-up act, wasn't it, really, to what was coming at the main event at Silverstone. My word! The MCR60 really, really worked, didn't it? And in the hands of Lando Norris, it was just phenomenal. And that's not to say that Oscar Piastri didn't do a good job. He did an outstanding job. And I feel that once again, Lando has proved that he is absolutely a championship contender if he's given the car to do it. And let's be honest, if he was in that Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen, we'd be having one heck of a season right now. Verstappen wouldn't have won 6 races in a row, which, as it is a phenomenal achievement. Even Lewis Hamilton hasn't won that many races in a row. And he's won a lot of races, 103 of them to be precise. But just on Red Bull, fantastic achievement for them, whether you love them or hate them, or whether you love Verstappen or you're not so keen on him. 6 wins in a row is a brilliant achievement, and it's just, you have to admire it. You have to admire it. Whether you are a fan of Red Bull or not, you have to admire it. The excellence, the execution of it, because we're seeing with Sergio Perez, it's very easy to get it wrong. But I've digressed. McLaren, absolutely brilliant to see them back at the front. To go on a little bit of a personal note here, when I got into F1 in the late 90s, the team that I followed was McLaren. Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard at the wheel, the chrome, well, silverish livery, the West sponsorship of that time. Just a classic livery for me. It's one that I connect with, obviously, because it's the one that got me into Formula One, and everyone else will feel a little bit different about different cars and liveries based on like how they fit, what they mean to them, essentially, and the period of their life they were in, and things like that. So to see the chrome on the car and it doing really well on the track was just great. I mean, they did the Triple Crown livery earlier in the year, and it didn't quite have the same effect because the car didn't perform very well. Unlike when they did the Golf livery back in 2021 and Lando ended up on the podium in Monaco. So, you know, it works better if the car goes better. So for McLaren to be at the sharp end of the grid is just great because they've got the history, they've won championships, and they've had just legendary drivers. Ayrton Senna, Niki Lauda, Lewis Hamilton, and the aforementioned Mika Hakkinen, a double world champion, and David Coulthard did quite well for them. So, you know, they've got so much history. The second most successful team after Ferrari, I think, at least still. I mean, Mercedes and Red Bull are quickly catching up with them. But so good. And the roar of the crowd when Lando put it on provisional pole, absolutely spine-tingling. And then again on Sunday when he took the lead, it was a brilliant moment. I was off my sofa shouting. My wife was telling me off for shouting too loud. I don't care. That was a brilliant moment. That's what we watch Formula One for. That's what we watch sport for. Those unexpected moments. Those moments where you think, wow, this really could happen. That's what it's all about. And I said at the start, Silverstone is the best because it gives great racing. And we saw Verstappen and Norris go a little bit wheel to wheel. Norris had to be, you know, robust in his defence, make sure he positioned the car well on the run down to Brooklands. But even if they'd gone wheel to wheel, they could have juked it out through Luffield and, you know, even into Copse. Oscar Piastri had a look into Copse. He thought better of it, but it would have been interesting to see if he'd stuck with it. How would Verstappen have dealt with it? Obviously, he took a very wide line through Copse and got on the dusty bit on the outside. So maybe he'd learned his lesson a little bit from 2021 and made sure that if a car was on the inside, he gave loads of room to make sure he stays in the race. So, you know, not to bring up 2021 again, but, you know, it's interesting how these things sort of come around again and how Verstappen is changing his approach into certain situations from when he was a younger, and I say less mature driver because he was less mature. You are at the age of 21, 22, 23 years old than compared to 25, 26. So he kept himself in the race. It's great to see the McLarens at the front. I'm repeating myself here, but it was just fabulous. So good. And Verstappen said it himself, if you put Lando Norris in a race-winning car, he'll simply win races. It's just that simple. On Max Verstappen, and I mentioned him earlier, again, a great achievement, but his teammate Sergio Perez. And I mentioned it's about execution and the excellence of execution, to coin a bit of a phrase from the old WWF days and Bret Hart. If you know, you know. So Verstappen is showing why drivers like he and Hamilton and Schumacher and Senna were just a cut above from the rest. And yes, there is an element of the car to it. That's obvious. Look at the difference a couple of races has made for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. The McLaren not functioning so great at the early races of this year. They've put some upgrades on it. The car's alive. They're able to exploit it. But the best drivers are able to extract absolutely everything, and maybe even a little bit more, out of the car, and just sort of rub everybody else's noses in it. And that's what Verstappen's doing at times this year. On pole by, almost a second at times in the wet in Canada. I think it was over a second. And Hamilton did the same. When Mercedes had, especially the W11 in 2020, he would be on comfortably on pole position and winning races at a canter. Well, I say at a canter. You don't need to if the car's that good. Verstappen's shown that. You take the Jackie Stewart line. You win in the slowest time possible. You make sure you bring the car home in one piece. But Checo Perez is being shown up a little bit at the moment, and that's not to discredit him, because the numbers don't lie. He's not made Q3 in the fastest car in the field 5 races in a row. That is unacceptable, I would say. And Helmut Marko is saying that there's no one else to put in the car. And it's almost like the kiss of death that in football, it's when the board back the manager. We've got no intention to sack the manager. 2 weeks later, they're out the door. And we know what Red Bull are like. They've got previous. They've done it before. They'll do it again. How long do they give Checo Perez? Is Daniel Ricciardo in with a shot of a 2024 seat? And Perez has been victim of contractual situations before, back at Racing Point when they wanted to bring in Sebastian Vettel. So they did, and they paid off Sergio, and off he went to Red Bull to win races. But his performances need to pick up. Yes, he can recover through the field, but the pack are closing in on Red Bull. I really think that the lack of aero time will start to bite a little bit, because we're seeing, and as my computer dings at me saying OneDrive hasn't signed in, Sergio Perez hasn't signed into Q3. That's our discussion point. And if his performances don't pick up, he could really find himself in hot water, because, as I said, we've seen Red Bull change drivers like it's going out of fashion. So Perez needs to pick up the pace in qualifying. The packing are closing in with the penalty, the aero time restriction, pinching Red Bull a little bit, and then they've got their penalty for the cost cap. But ultimately, it's how it affects 2024, which everyone's going to be most interested in. I think this season obviously is gone. I think all the other teams should be looking at how they can develop next year's car, but obviously there's things you can still learn from this year. So develop this year's car, and then maybe if this year's car is, say Mercedes for example, if this year's car finishes really well, use it as a baseline, build on it in 24. Ferrari have got a few issues to sort out. Aston Martin, they had a quiet race yesterday. Alonso was kind of nowhere. He was neither quick nor slow, which is an odd thing to say about Fernando Alonso. Didn't even hear a team radio. So, he can't have been too unhappy. But he said in Canada, no more races without podiums. 2 races later, no podiums. So it's going to be an interesting run to the end of the season in the development race and see who's doing what, preparing for 2024. And there is the crux of the matter for Sergio Perez. if he continues to be outperformed and not make the most of his car, he could be in a bit of trouble. We'll talk about Mercedes quickly. Lewis Hamilton, the big gainer from the safety car, which gave us 2 Brits on the podium for the first time in nearly 25 years. The last time that happened before yesterday was in 1999, David Coulthard winning ahead of Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari. And Lewis, he drove a good race. His strategy was going to unfold. Whether he would have had the pace on the softs to really make much headway, we'll never know. But his attempts to catch Lando after the safety car kind of showed that he probably wouldn't have made a huge amount of progress. And it did bump Oscar Piastri off the podium, sadly. Although sometimes it's good for young drivers to have these sort of mini setbacks. A P4 is still a fantastic result for Oscar, let's be honest. And it is just a bit of misfortune that's cost him a podium. So it's nothing necessarily that he's done wrong. It's just a little bit of bad luck. So from that point of view, it's not a bad result. Okay, he'll be disappointed to miss out on the podium. But for a British person's point of view, it was great to see 2 Brits on the podium again. Although a double McLaren podium would have been equally as popular. Looking a bit further down, Alex Albon again proving that maybe he is the man to fill the Red Bull seat alongside Max Verstappen. Although, would he want to go back? I mean, I don't think he's a world championship winning driver in waiting. I just don't see it with Alex, unfortunately. But I think he's a very, very good backup driver. Not to use that phrase disparagingly, but he is a great sort of supporting role. He'll do a great job for a team, and this might surprise you, like Mercedes. Now, I've got a bit of a theory that maybe when Lewis Hamilton hangs up his helmet, Mercedes should be going for Alex Albon. And there's a lot to this, because obviously James Vowles is working with Albon at the moment. Albon will know from Williams, the Mercedes power unit really well. You know, the lines are there to sort of connect it. And perhaps if your man is George Russell at Mercedes and Alex Albon alongside, they're good friends, they'll work well together. Okay, we've seen it go not so well when you put 2 buddies in a Mercedes, but I don't think there'll be that needle, because I think Russell has a little bit more on Albon. But Albon is certainly quick enough to challenge a George Russell or perhaps a Charles Leclerc at Ferrari. But I wouldn't go to Ferrari because they don't know their head from their bottom, it would seem, because they managed to turn 4th and 5th on the grid to 9th and 10th in the race through, you guessed it, terrible strategy. But Alex Albon beating both Ferraris, again working wonders in that Williams. Logan Sargent, very unlucky to finish in 11th, just a few seconds off of the points. But that proved that the Williams pace in Silverstone was absolutely genuine. My predictions, we'll just go through those very quickly to round off the show, because I don't want it to be too long, because I'm conscious of obviously people listening on audio and people watching. You don't have hours and hours on end to sort of take in my content, so I want to make it as sort of sharp as possible, to the point, so that we get through the things. And at the moment I am just filling. So like a professional commentator, I'm filling as I try and find my predictions. So the 5 things that would definitely happen at the British Grand Prix. Number 1, Lando Norris would qualify in the top 8. He qualified on the front row. So that might have been a little bit too generous of me to just say top 8. So that one happened. So that's 1 out of 5. Alpine would score no points. Ocon wasn't allowed enough time to rack up 30 seconds of time penalties, and Lance Stroll saw to Pierre Gasly. That's 2 for 2. Nick De Vries won't qualify last. Well, Bottas was disqualified, so technically he didn't qualify, and Kevin Magnussen broke down. So Nick De Vries did not qualify last. 3 for 3. Aston Martin would be the slowest of the top 4 teams. In qualifying, they were the slowest. So without Ferrari being Ferrari, and maybe the safety car, Aston Martin would have finished behind them as well. So taking the qualifying speed and marking my own homework here, 4 out of 4. And finally, Sergio Perez wouldn't finish on the podium, 5 out of 5. And then race prediction, I didn't do quite so well. Pole position, I went for Verstappen. He got it, but he was made to work for it as well. For the victory, which he duly took. Had Hamilton second, Leclerc third. Hamilton finished third. Did anybody predict Lando Norris on the podium? So that is 2 out of 4 on that regard. That's going to bring my British Grand Prix thoughts to an end. There'll be a few more thoughts each on each driver, if I can get the words out, with my driver ratings that will come later in the week, probably out on Thursday. You can find more of my thoughts on the British Grand Prix on the Grid Talk podcast. I was on the panel after the race yesterday afternoon. I'm also going to be on the F2 show reviewing the F2 action at the weekend. Ollie Behrman was fantastic in front of the home crowd. Didn't quite get the results, but he put up a good fight. And the F2 action was genuinely very, very exciting. A really good feature race, actually, on Sunday morning. We've got a weekend off now ahead of the Hungarian Grand Prix, but there will be Formula E action this weekend, and I think there may even be some IndyCar action in Toronto. So I'm just going to fill again because I'm going through my apps and trying to find IndyCar, which you can find out why it's better than Formula One in a video that I did earlier on. You can also check out my episode 1 of Co-op Career with Ruby, the Grid Talk host, who has been a guest on this channel. We've jumped in the Haas car. We're going to be going through F123 together and seeing who comes out on top. It's Pad, which I'm using a controller. This one, for those of you who can't see because you're listening on audio, I'm holding up a PlayStation controller, and Ruby's on a wheel. I can't show you that because it's at her house and she lives 4 or 5 hours away from me. So you'll just have to imagine a steering wheel. Yes, there is IndyCar next weekend, so lots more racing action to enjoy. I'll try my best to get some watch-along action for the Formula E. Can't say it will be easy because sadly I'm going to be moving house soon. So all the stuff behind me will have to come down at some point, and so will my computer and desk setup. Not ideal, so I may disappear for a little while, but rest assured I'll still be here. I'll still be I won't be tweeting because Twitter's been murdered by Threads. So you can follow me on Threads, Aaron Harper 22. The same on Instagram. You can follow me, AHGP Pod, on Twitter, Aaron Harper 41. Everything's down below. Everything's in the description. So, follow me on everywhere. And subscribe for more Grand Prix content. Like the pod if you enjoy it. And share it with others so they can listen to me waffle as well. If you've got this far, thanks for sticking with me. That's all I can say. And I'll see you for my driver ratings on Thursday. Until then, goodbye.